Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Saddam Hussein.
Danger. Continuing danger. Hour of danger.
والله لا تصلي النار لكن نص إسرائيل.
قررت المحكمة الحكم على المدان صدام حسين المجيد بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت لارتكاب
عيش الشعب.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا.
The night of December 29th, 2006, in Baghdad, carried a silence thick with history. Inside a small concrete cell, the man who once ruled Iraq with an iron fist stirred in the dark, unaware that the clock was counting down his final hours. For decades, Saddam Hussein's name had meant power, fear, and control. But that night, behind the cold walls of a US military compound, the once mighty dictator was reduced to a prisoner, one watched by men who had come to see not just a tyrant, but an aging human waiting for the inevitable. Outside, the city that had once bowed to his rule was holding its breath. Soldiers whispered, engines idled, orders were being signed. In a few short hours, the world would awaken to headlines that marked the end of an era and the beginning of a darker question. What truly dies when a dictator falls? The final night in the cell. It was the night of December 29th, 2006. Deep inside a small concrete cell in Baghdad, Saddam Hussein opened his eyes to another cold morning, not knowing it would be his last. The US guards, known as the Super 12, had already received silent confirmation. The execution would happen soon. For months they had waited, unsure when the call would come. But that night felt different. The air around the cell carried a strange tension, quiet, heavy, final. For a man who once ruled a country with absolute power, Saddam was now a prisoner, watched over by the very people who once feared him. No speeches, no crowds, no army. Just the sound of footsteps echoing through the narrow corridor of his last night on earth. The weight of an ending. The soldiers guarding Saddam felt a strange mix of duty and discomfort. They had lived near him for years, learning his habits, hearing his jokes, and watching him age behind bars. To them, he was not just a dictator anymore. He was an old man who complained about his back and asked for books to read. Yet, they could never forget who he was. Outside those walls, millions remembered him for wars, massacres, and endless suffering. Inside, the guards carried the quiet weight of knowing they were part of history. His fall was more than the end of a man. It was the end of an era that had shaped Iraq for decades. Still, no one could say whether this ending would bring peace or open new wounds. The last supper before dawn, Saddam Hussein sat down to his final meal. On the metal tray lay an unlikely dish, lobster tails from the Coalition Cafe at Camp Victory. He ate calmly, savoring each bite as if it were an ordinary dinner. The guards watched in silence, surprised by how peaceful he seemed. There was no anger, no fear, only quiet acceptance. He even joked about gaining weight, saying he had become fat like an American. Around him, the prison was still, the lights dimmed. Outside, Baghdad slept uneasily, unaware that the man who once ruled it was enjoying his last meal. It was a strange image. The powerful dictator who once feasted in golden palaces, now eating alone under the buzz of fluorescent light, with soldiers as his only company. The moment of truth. At exactly 3 a.m, the silence broke. First Lieutenant Andre Jackson entered Saddam's cell with his interpreter. The message was simple and direct. It was time to prepare. Saddam listened without emotion. He didn't ask questions or argue. "I've been sentenced to death before," he said quietly, as if he had already accepted his fate long ago. For the interpreter, who had spent months speaking with Saddam, this was a painful moment. The man he had once translated for every day was now a few hours away from death. Even though Saddam was calm, the weight of the moment filled the room. As the guards stepped back into the hallway, each of them understood that history was about to change, and they were standing in the middle of it. A prisoner's dignity. Saddam asked for time to wash and dress. Using the small sink in his cell, he carefully bathed himself, as if preparing for an important meeting. He insisted on wearing his best suit, a dark, neatly pressed one, and his favorite cologne. For a few minutes, he wasn't a prisoner. He was a man reclaiming the last piece of dignity he had left. He looked calm, steady, and ready. The guards watched quietly as he struggled to find matching socks, laughing softly when he did. Even in this moment, he cared about how he looked. For a man who had lost everything, appearance was the one thing he could still control. In those small actions, Saddam seemed to face his end not as a dictator, but as a man determined to die with pride. The unexpected humanity. Before leaving the cell, Saddam surprised everyone. He called one of the guards closer and handed him his wristwatch, a Raymond Weil, silver and elegant. The guard hesitated. Accepting gifts was forbidden, but Saddam insisted. "You were a good friend," he said softly. The soldier nodded, unsure what to feel. For years, he had guarded one of history's most feared men. Yet at that moment, Saddam seemed simply human. He thanked each soldier one by one, shaking hands and meeting their eyes. Some guards felt their chests tighten, unsure if it was guilt or respect. They had come to see a monster, but were now saying goodbye to a man. That quiet exchange of words and emotions would stay with them long after the cell door closed behind him. The final journey. The convoy left under a moonless sky. The streets of Baghdad were silent. No traffic, no voices, only the low hum of military engines. Saddam sat in the armored vehicle, surrounded by soldiers, his face calm and unreadable. The destination was Camp Justice, a name heavy with irony. It had once been the site of torture chambers under Saddam's own rule. Now it would be the place of his execution. The journey was short but tense. Every soldier in that convoy understood the moment's weight. The man who once controlled the entire nation was now being driven to the place of his own death. The silence inside the vehicle said more than words ever could. Even those who despised him could feel the gravity of what was about to happen. Face of defiance. Inside Camp Justice, Saddam was led to the gallows. His dark overcoat was neatly buttoned, his hands steady. He refused to wear a hood, wanting the world to see his face. He held his Quran tightly and looked at the men around him, some of whom had suffered under his rule. When a few began shouting insults, he smirked. "The hell, that is Iraq," he replied sharply. Even at the edge of death, he refused to show fear. The room grew tense as officials shouted and cameras rolled. For a brief moment, Saddam seemed to take control again, not as a ruler, but as a man determined to face death on his own terms. His pride, his defiance, his final words all became part of a history too heavy to forget. The final seconds. The room filled with noise and tension. Saddam began to recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. "There is no God but Allah." His words were cut short by the sound of the lever being pulled. The floor opened beneath him. The rope swung gently in the cold air. It was 6 a.m. when the doctor confirmed his death. Outside, Baghdad erupted in gunfire. Not war, but celebration. Some cried, others cheered. After decades of fear, Saddam Hussein was gone. For the guards, it was over, but the silence afterward felt strange, even haunting. No one spoke. They had witnessed something unforgettable, not victory, not relief, but the unsettling stillness that follows when history finally closes one of its darkest chapters. The echo that never fades. When the sun rose over Baghdad, the world had changed. News of Saddam Hussein's death spread fast, flashing across televisions and radios. Many called it justice, others saw it as revenge. But for Iraq, the future was uncertain. The years that followed brought more conflict, more division, and more pain. His story is more than history. It's a lesson about pride, justice, and the price a nation pays for change. Thank you for watching and staying until the end. If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more valuable insights into moments that shaped our world. Stay curious, because our next story will take you even deeper into the events that changed history forever.